Hello, everyone. Welcome to Performing the Arts, Episode 7 of Season 3. My name, as always, is Brian M. Davis. Joining me today is Stephanie Sottile. This is what we were just talking about. But yeah, Stephanie is an actress from the tri-state area, mostly from both New York and probably Jersey too. But her Jersey experience is more so on the wrestling side, which we'll touch upon later. But yeah, I've known her for the past, I want to say 2006, 2006, oh geez, that's long. I mean, 2016 to, I want to say 2016, 2017, because I saw her in one of the Shakespeare plays. I think it was probably either Julius Caesar or maybe, yeah, it was probably Julius Caesar from the BrooklynOne.
Yeah, that was the first one that I was in.
Yeah, so I saw her in Julius Caesar, and then I got to work with her with Much Ado About Nothing, like a summer or two later. And yeah, and I know her from wrestling, which we'll get to later. But but it's weird how you're both an actress, but also workable on the wrestling side.
Yeah.
How did but yeah, how did you get into acting first?
So it's just something that I really wanted to do since I was a kid. When I was very little, up until I was maybe 14, I was always very, very shy. I was deathly scared of my own shadow, level shy. And the only time that I wasn't is when I was performing.
Yeah.
And I realized pretty quickly, to me, this is like a superpower, just to be somebody else is the only time that I came out of my shell. It's the only time that I felt comfortable. And I realized that pretty early on, 11 or 12. I figured this is what I want to do. I figured out I figured out pretty quickly. A lot of people don't really know what they want to do. And I remember never having that kind of crisis, going through high school and into college. I'm no, I have a pretty solid idea. I am good. I had it figured out.
Yeah, I think no, go ahead. It's weird how in college you always have that crisis of what we gotta do. It's because they signed you up for when I went to college, they signed me up for a liberal arts degree, even though I didn't want to do a liberal arts degree, and it was I had to fight I literally had to fight just to get into the performing arts program, and then it was do you really want to do that? But yeah, it's weird how essentially once you set upon something, college might say, you might want to try something like this. So yeah, I definitely agree with college being almost a mystery all by itself at the same time, and helps you find your path, even though that path doesn't want to be the same path it wants you to be on.
Yeah. I mean, I figured out that I did also it did help me figure out that I did also want to be involved in other things. I've been involved for comedy for over a decade as well. So I figured that out in college that, this is something I also very much enjoy. As for sketch comedy, I've been involved with that for over a decade, whether it's writing it or producing shows or directing. I have a long-standing history with that too, and they're it's a very different animal than legitimate theater. To be involved with comedy is very, very, very different.
It is. I'm only done sketch comedy a couple of times because of off-Broadway shows, but it's performing sketch comedy. You get your sensation after maybe performing a couple of the skits, but when you have to write write your own jokes and all that stuff, it's hard. It's
it's also I guess I do appreciate that about theater is you do get an immediate reaction.
Yeah.
It's obviously, there's also a beauty to film, but there's the differences. I can work on something for so long and then I have to wait for what people might think about it and then make adjustments later, as opposed to live performing. It's like, okay, I have an idea of where there might be issues, and then I can change it for next time, especially for sketches. I mean, you don't just perform it once and then never again. You workshop it, you figure out where the problem areas are, and I do like that about it. It's like, okay, this is a little bit easier to see where the problems are.
What's one called? Theater is like, when you perform theater, it's like you're kind of doing like a set routine where it's like, oh, do the same play, but it's like 7 nights a week, or maybe 8 nights a week, twice maybe on Saturdays. But when you do like a sketch comedy thing, it's literally like, okay, we see what jokes we have, and we see what jokes work, what jokes fall flat, that sort of thing.
It's really rewarding to workshop a sketch, though. I've been doing that for so long. To write something, to get an idea, and then to have like maybe part of it not work or something and figure out why, it is very rewarding to adjust it and make and see if it goes better.
Aside from
super rewarding.
It is. It is really. Aside from sketch comedy, do you write anything else, like poetry and stuff like that?
I've written short like scenes, like short little films. I mean, everything that I've mostly written has been comedic to some extent, even if it's not a straightforward sketch. So they're either scenes or short films. So to me, it's all in the same category. I was taking like playwriting classes to get back into that. So I think hopefully soon, like I would want to jump into that and try to, one of my goals would be to write like a full length play. That would have been an awesome goal. That would have been an amazing goal for 2020. Except the world exploded. So it kind of stopped a lot of people's plans.
Well, it's still not stopping you to write that play too. It's like,
no, but I, to get into it, like I took a playwriting class. The woman who taught it is very, very smart and very encouraging. And I had an idea. I told her, if you do this class it's like an independent class, so it's a few people at a time. And I said, if you did this before with other people, like let's all come together and have a little workshop, and we can all write something, and it can be like a reading of all of your students and their work, which she really liked. And she's like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do that. Like that's a good idea. Let's do it. That was supposed to be this year. So as soon as she was like gonna get everybody started,
COVID happened.
So eventually it's also easier when I have, because it's something new that I've never dived into. I have a ton of ideas, but I never structured something writing wise that's on the dramatic side. And it is more encouraging when I'm in that setting where I have somebody else I can show like my work to, or something. Hey, what do you think? Like, you're the expert here, just to help guide me along. Cause it's something I've never really dived into, except really in college. And that's like, it wasn't a lot. So when it's something new, it would have been a nice environment to get that started. So knock on wood, when we get back to normal, that would be the next thing I want to dive into, because also with her class, I have a ton of stuff that's been written. A lot of it obviously would have to be multiple drafts, but it's something to jump off with. So it is something else I'd want to explore, is write something of my own to put on stage, because I've been obviously there as an actor, I've been as a producer, I've produced a lot of shows, like a lot of live entertainment shows, not just theater, but a lot of sketch comedy shows, stand-up, like a lot of variety. So it's been a lot of different things that I've produced, I've been in, and I've directed. So besides comedy, it's not, I haven't done anything like straight dramatic that I've written and could put up there. So it would be a fun challenge.
But back to college, an odd statement to make. Sure. Where did you go to college to study the theater arts?
I went to Hofstra University in Long Island, New York. I'm originally from South Florida, and I've always gotten a lot of weird looks. How did you get from Florida to Long Island? My mom was a born and bred New Yorker, born Brooklyn, raised in Manhattan. She was New York all the way through. And she encouraged me my whole life. It was almost like brainwashing, but not on purpose. Like she accidentally brainwashed me. She's like, you gotta get out of here. You gotta go to New York. Like as a kid, she hated Florida, always hated Florida. And ever since I was a kid, like romanticized the heck out of New York. That was her home, like she loved it there. I mean, she grew up there in the 60s and 70s, very different place. But she romanticized the heck out of it. She's like, when you get older, go to New York, get out of here, get out of Florida, and just filled me with that, like those thoughts. So when I got older and this was the discussion, and I admitted, like, this is what I want to do, she was okay with it. She was always like encouraging. My dad, not so much. But my mom's like, if that's what you want to do, that's great. Like, she at first thought it was because, did we never give you enough attention? Why do you want to perform? Why do you want to do this? Like, no, that has nothing to do with it. I like being other people. I like escaping to be other people. It's nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with attention.
Look, I just like to say lines that I'm going through my head. Okay, so it's like being characters. It's a fun thing to do, especially when it's a character you haven't done. So yeah.
I mean, for me, it's an escape. It's like I don't, again, I was a very shy child, very, very low self-esteem. So to me, it was just, oh, I'm going to be another person. I'm just going to escape my, mind that's not really fun all the time, and just I can be other people. So I didn't tell her that. I was like, I don't want to make you feel bad, but I just want to be. I just don't want to be me. So that's why I do this. It's nothing to do with attention. So when I was researching, she knew of Hofstra. I don't remember how, but she always knew of Hofstra, and she always heard of their drama program. Yeah. She always heard that it had a lot of respect. And granted, it does. There were a lot of instances after college, during it, where I would hear, and I don't know how true that is today, but I would hear, when people see that on your resume, it is respected for that program. Yeah. So obviously so are other programs like NYU and all that, but it was looked at with like, oh, okay, very nice. At least that's what I was told as I was, growing up. So that really was the only choice that I had. I did early decision. I got in. I was like, okay, this was easy. I didn't pick anywhere else. I was like, yeah, I was told about this school. We went there, we researched it. Honestly, my second choice was somewhere in Chicago. It was like another type of performing arts school that was in Chicago. I could have ended up there. But again, I kept my mom, filled on my head with New York and all that. And so and New York NYU was way too expensive. I was like, there's no absolute, I am not going to.
Same thing with Columbia too.
Yeah, absolutely. I looked at all that. All of my schools were just New York, except for one or two. And that's how I kind of weeded them out. I was like, well, what percentage is, because I looked up all these stats at the time. There was like a big book of all these stats of all the colleges, like, their tuition, like the percentage of acceptance, the percentage of how many people are in which major, like where would I fit in best? Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is okay. And they lied. They're like, yeah, we're super close to New York. No, they're not.
No, but
they're not. I mean, Long Island Railroad. Yeah.
There's a reason why Long Island is called Long Island, okay? Because aside from the joke, it's a Long Island. Just getting to somewhere on Long Island takes ages, and just it takes you like just getting somewhere to like Montauk. That's like the end of Long Island. That's like a 5-hour drive.
Yeah.
That may be a 5.
No, and it's not just. Yeah, it's not just like it's also just getting to the train was a problem. Like
Yeah.
we had a bus on campus that took you to the surrounding areas around campus, including 2 different train stations. One of them not super safe at night for women, and the other one didn't run all the time. There were 2 different LIRR stops that were near Hofstra.
Oh.
And you just really had to be careful. I'm like, this is not like an easy trek into New York. Um, so it wasn't super close. It wasn't the easiest to commute. Like, is it doable? Yeah. Like, I did it all through college. And honestly, the first time that I did it on my own, because friends, you and your friends that would happen a few times. Just hop on, go spend the day there, come back
Yeah.
come back before nightfall. Because certain areas near the college, you don't want to be there when it's at nighttime if you're a woman. It's not super safe sometimes. So you go in groups, and so
Yeah.
you do that a lot. And the first time I took it by myself, I had gotten a real job as a stage manager
Oh, nice.
for this little company. I was like 20. So I was like a year out from graduating, and I learned that as a skill. Like, as a person, I'm very, very organized. Like, I'm very anal retentive about keeping everything in place. And that's just like separate from the creative stuff. I'm very, very organized. I do everything very methodically. So I also, throughout all of college, they have you obviously take a lot of classes about learning behind the scenes.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You learn about, you take classes where you
Kind of
learn
like,
how to build the
like,
set, or like use certain tools if you want to go that way.
yeah,
Like, they show you a little bit about what happens in the costuming. Like, you just get little, there's a
glimpses,
class that you
like
take,
little,
you get little glimpses, right, of the
yeah,
production side.
yeah.
That way, does any of this interest you? And part of that was also stage managing. So
Yeah.
once I learned what that was about, I was like, oh, this to keep everything organized, like this is like perfect for me. If I wanted to like explore the production side as a job. So I was able to do that. And it was for like this little company that did little shows for school, like teaching you a little bit about history, or just like little performances for kids that they go around the
Yeah.
schools. Oddly enough, I never had to go with them to the actual performances. I was just there for rehearsals to like keep everything on track, keep everybody there, organized, all that stuff. It wasn't super demanding, but it was really exciting. I was like, I'm 20. This is like my first actual job in the city. I'm stage managing
I'm in the
for
field. I'm actually seeing how
yeah.
things are working, and then
I'm getting real money. Like, I still have a copy of my first check that I got.
Oh,
This is super exciting.
Awesome.
And that was the first time I went into the city by myself. And I swear what it felt like, I was like, I'm a woman. I'm an adult. This is insane. I left my dorm on my own, got to the city, didn't get lost, got back. Like, it felt like a real accomplishment. And what's funny is, like, looking back, it was so not like the insane trek that I thought it was, because I went to Penn Station, which, if you know, is like 34th and 8th.
Yeah.
My rehearsals for these shows were at 36th and 8th. I was 2 blocks away. And for me, I'm like, this is like, excuse me, let me take my backpack and venture out. I shall come back.
2 blocks in Manhattan is kind of like 5 blocks in a normal Brooklyn thing, but it's like you walk a Manhattan block, it's like literally like 3 blocks normally. But if you walk like one stretch of block in Manhattan, it's still like, because my job before COVID had shut everything down. My job was on West 38th Street. Yeah, West 36, West 38th Street, around there. So I used to go through Bryant Park, no relation, to most of my things. So like and the weird thing is that when I would go and see shows, in Manhattan with my friends and everything, I would have to get to Bryant Park in order to get the D train, because the D train was right in Bryant Park. And all my memories beforehand was like, oh, it's it's like we're like 10 blocks away, and then I'd be like, looking on this now, it's like it's not even 10 blocks away. It's like 3 blocks over. It's like, but to me, because the way New York, Manhattan is like formatted,
it seems
down,
more daunting than like it really is.
Yeah. Especially if especially with the theaters I have to go to, it's like, oh, I got to go to the Phantom of the Opera theater. It's like, okay, that's a couple of blocks away, but to how it looks to any New Yorker, to any tourist, well, sorry, tourists, but to anybody who isn't a native New Yorker, it's very daunting to see. It's just like, oh, you got to go.
Oh, yeah.
Especially,
my first day venturing out there, I got lost.
Oh yeah.
Like that was what I was building up to. I'm like, now that I'm an adult looking at it, I was 2 or 3 blocks away from Penn Station. I somehow got lost. Like I corrected myself, but I remember this was also before.
And it's easy to get lost
smartphones.
too.
Like I didn't. Yeah,
in New York City.
I didn't have a map. I think I printed one out. That was the thing I always did. If I was going somewhere new, I would print out a map. Because before smartphones, before
Google Maps,
I would just do it manually, and I somehow got lost. Now it's like, oh, it's so easy. But that way it was just like it was all brand new.
Yeah,
it was just that I was like Mary Tyler Moore. I'm like, once I got home, I'm like, I'm gonna make it after all. Through my hat in the air, I'm like, I got this. It's good. Yeah, but that's how that started. I graduated.
The amount of times I've actually got lost in the Lower East Side is hilarious because it's weird. It's like New York City, at least Manhattan-wise, it shouldn't be that like hard to go because one down block, But a lot of these blocks are very similar, especially if you're walking down 2 blocks. It's like, oh, I just gotta go to 48th Street and on 45th Street. It's like just walk 3 blocks, but once you pass by 48th Street, you might not notice it because I've done that like countless of times on my job where it's like, oh, I got to go to 48th Street, and then I'll be like walking, and then I go like, wait a minute, I'm like 51st Street now. It's like, how did I get past here? I'm like, because the weird thing is
like the further away you get from the center, the less it's like a grid, and I still don't have a handle on it. I to all those places where it's not just avenues or streets, I still like need a little extra help. I'm still not super familiar with it.
All right. So out of that traction that we had,
yeah, but that's how I got started, and I graduated a semester early. So I graduated after
nice.
3.5 years. After 3.5 years, because I don't know, I thought taking all these AP classes would do something. I mean, it did, but it gave me like a semester's worth. So I was done in 3.5 years instead of 4.
Which is always nice to do. So, especially, to graduate early instead of like your planned time is like I was able to graduate early, so I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, and I had a rough time in college. Like I've been asked before about like how I got here. I've been asked about, same thing, all these things you're asking me. And I always say like, I did not fit in with the rest of these. Like you always hear jokes about like theater kids. I'm like, yeah, I was not that. That's not me. I don't fit into that stereotype. I don't care. I don't judge. Like plenty of people I know that are great that have that stereotype, but it's also just that as a stereotype of, over energetic and like, just like very self-centered. That's kind of that's like the stereotype. And I just didn't, in my class, the people that were in my major, they were a lot of times that they were kind of loud and like a little too judgmental. And I had my own things I was going through. I just didn't fit because I didn't have the same influences. Like similar to why I was involved in sketch comedy, a lot of my influences were not just actors. A lot of mine were stand-up comedians, like the people that I looked up to, the performers that I respected. You're not really gonna be like a lot of other people when
Yeah.
someone you hold, when one of the people you hold close to your heart is Bill Hicks. I mean, you're gonna already like I saw
Like you
Bill Hicks.
like with Bill Hicks, you have a mindset of like what type of comedy you want to do, especially like
yeah.
Especially when he does like him ripping on a heckler is just so legendary because he's just doing his set and then there's this heckler and then you just kind of down a second until he just finally rips him a new one in front. And when he finally does,
I love that he's brutal. He was amazing.
It's like another another stand-up comedy that I love is Bill Burr, and his stuff is like similar. Like his stuff is similar to Bill Hicks, whereas Bill Hicks was just like kind of angry. Bill Burr has like the same kind of angry energy, and he actually did the same thing with a heckler, but instead of it was one heckler, it was the entire city of Philadelphia, which is hilarious.
Oh, yep. Oh, trust me. You're talking about the Opie and Anthony traveling virus tour. I know all about that. Yeah. Oh boy, do I. I wasn't at that one. I think I went to the one the next year. But I do know a few people who were like actually there when that happened. No, trust me, I know all about that. Bill Burr was also one of my favorites. When I was a kid, that's also what I was getting to, is my influences were starkly different than a lot of other people's. Do you have any other influences? No, go ahead. No, it's perfect. Do you have any other influences that actually does help you in terms of your acting as well as like, say, comedic talents or comedic energy? Oh, no, yeah, absolutely. The thing is, like, I think it's helpful to get influences from a lot of other different places. I mean, if you just take in one type of art form, it's not going to leave you much room to kind of explore creatively. You look at a lot of different things. I mean, I have my favorite actors. Like when I was growing up, Marissa Tomei was actually one of the first things I saw when I was 7. I saw My Cousin Vinny. And
which I just rewatched, by the way.
She's brilliant in it.
Yeah, she is.
She's a brilliant character actress. And when I was a kid, that whole movie, I still know to this day, backwards and forwards. And as a kid, I would just imitate her. I mean, that was my parlor trick. My mom would ask me all the time, Stephanie, do My Cousin Vinny, do the courtroom scene. I was a 7-year-old kid. I was just like saying this over. I did that as an adult. People just found it funny. Like, not as an adult, but like in high school, that's what I would do. I would just like repeat these things. It was just so fun to me. He was one of them. Jim Carrey was also one of my, I've seen him since I was 6 years old. I'm like, I respected just how do I word this? The way that I word things about Jim Carrey, I go, he has never once phoned it in for anything he's ever done. Everything he's ever done, he gives 1,000% to everything.
Even when I
love that about him.
Even when it's a film that he just did a paycheck, he's just like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm just gonna go all out.
Oh yeah, of course.
Sonic
the Majestic, terrible movie. He was great. Yeah. Majestic was horrible. I saw Sonic was when I came up with that. I saw Sonic earlier this year, and I'm like, Jim Carrey is the CEO of never phoning it in. Like this dude always goes out. I respect him so much for that. Paul Giamatti is also like, I love it, like every role he's ever taken on, he plays this everyman type character, and it's very strange as a young girl to. It's very strange as a young girl to relate to that, but I love that. I always loved his, not only a great actor, but he has just this, to me, every role he's been in, it's like he plays these characters that are just screaming, I want someone to see me and to appreciate me. It's got that tinge to it, and I always appreciate that. I always connected to that level, that part of it. Yeah. I connect that a lot. That's why I say a lot of my influencers are weird, because I connect to a lot of people that I saw a similarity in that you probably shouldn't. I mean, I always say, like, I saw, obviously on TV, I never saw any of these people live, but I saw George Carlin for the first time when I was 7. My parents just had it on. Again, I saw Bill Hicks when I was 15. When I was like 9 years old to as an adult, I took in a lot of stand-up comedy. It's all I watched. No, I was not discriminate. Everybody. Like, this was at the time Comedy Central showed a lot of comedy, and just like hours and hours of all these different stand-up specials, and Comedy Central Presents and Premium Blend and Pulp Comics and Tompkins Square, like all this stuff. I just took all of it in, you know?
I haven't heard of those shows in like 20 years.
Like that,
and that's,
like,
I'm just like, wow. It's like
you know,
those are shows I haven't heard of. Like in 20 years, I'm just like.
You know that video game character Kirby where he just like sucks everything in? And if you play video, that's what it was, just like everything. Like, and I saw a lot of New York locals that I grew up to later learn, you know, these are like New York comics, you know, like Jim Norton, Robert Kelly, Bill Burr, Patrice O'Neill. I grew up watching these people. Like I saw Jim Norton on TV for the first time, I think when I was 11 or 12. And I was like, oh, this is my guy. That is not a standard thought to have as a 12-year-old girl. If you've ever seen Jim Norton, his act, it's not normal for a 12-year-old girl to look at that and go, dude, I relate to you. Like, I get it. I get what you're going for. Because it wasn't just like what they were saying. It was the fact that you are pushing the envelope, not just to do it, but it's because it's part of what you want to say. You have to do that. You want to discuss these things that make people uncomfortable because you're trying to say something that's not really being said elsewhere. And I always respected that, and I love that. But it also, it's just you just act differently. It kind of just like altered my mind, you know what I mean? Like a little bit.
Yeah.
I have because again, when you appreciate stuff like that at a young age, I can have a very warped and very dark sense of humor, because to me, that's what's real. Like when you dive into the worst parts of humanity and you're willing to talk about it, and not only that, you're willing to joke about it, that to me is very, very real, and I always respect that. It's why I respect comedians like that, just like Bill Burr. Anytime you see him, and especially in interviews, the dude just does not care. He just is genuinely himself, and I always appreciate that. I always appreciate realism.
Yeah,
you know, any comedians that are like, we're just being weird just for the sake of weird, I can't stand. I always hate that stuff. I always love the comedians that are just very real and very raw. It doesn't necessarily obviously has to be blue or like a lot of cursing or any of that stuff. I don't care about that. I love it when they're genuine people. And all the people that I grew up respecting and who influenced me was that. You know what I mean? So not necessarily... It's not like I didn't watch all of that and think, oh, I want to be a stand-up, because I knew that was not in my heart. I knew that that's not how I want to express myself through my art. That's how they do it, and that's fine. But I also knew from a very young age, I was like, I can respect what they're doing and be very knowledgeable about it and be influenced by them as people, and I don't necessarily have to do it. I think it's a good thing to see the difference there. There's a lot of people that I've seen, because again, I've produced a lot of shows, who love stand-up and kind of like, well, I do all these other things that involve comedy. Why don't I just try this? Like people sometimes see it as a stepping stone and not necessarily a destination. So it can sometimes not get the respect that it deserves. You know, there's a lot of people that don't see that there should be like a lot of work put into it, and it's a legitimate art form that should be respected. And that's not everybody, but sometimes that's just how it's seen. And certainly, you know, for the comedians that I loved growing up, a lot of times they did not get the respect that I thought they deserved. Just because, I mean, because of what they talk about, because they decide, you know, they make audiences uncomfortable. So a lot of times, like, I don't want to.
A good comedian that I know of that didn't get because he was like very known to be very grass was Dennis Leary, and I loved watching Dennis Leary stuff when I watched in the 90s, where he was like, oh, no cure for cancer, that sort of thing. And he would always be known as a very crassy comedian, you know, similar to Bill Hicks, even though there was a lot of things where people were like, oh, he's ripped off Bill Hicks.
He's been accused of doing that.
Even though in comedy, people rip off everyone else's routines every now and then. It's like, it's no particular where people just like rip off jokes. It was like, it acts, that sort of thing. But
yeah, I mean, there's certainly a difference between, there's definitely a difference between similar personalities, parallel thinking, and just straight up stealing. I mean, there's a clear difference there.
The thing with Larry, though, is like, he ended up doing a great TV show called Rescue Me for I want to say from like 2003, 2002, around like the early 2000s to at least 2007 or at least 8. So at least 5 years on FX, and it's a great show too because you just see how well he is an actor. Because he doesn't really do that much like dramatic stuff. Because when you do see him as a dramatic actor, he's really good. And
a lot of comedic actors, shockingly, are really wonderful,
really good
in these serious roles. I remember, he, I mean, redact his name if you'd like, but Louis C.K. was also at the top of that list of those types of people, where he was a stand-up, and then his show was really respected as a piece of art, like as a piece of filmmaking. His FX show was looked at as like, oh God, we respect you as a filmmaker. Like, you're trying to say something else. Yeah. Ricky Gervais, also in the same boat, was known for the original Office, was known for, as a comedian, but his 2 movies, The Invention of Lying and Ghost Town. I'm pretty sure I got that right. They both have elements. They both have elements in them. When it gets dramatic, it's like, oh God, he kicks you in the heart. He's really good at that. And it like sneaks up on you. His stuff that tends to do that is like, you're watching it, you're going to be fine. And then all of a sudden, why am I bawling? Like, he has a really good, he's able to do that really well. His show on Netflix, Afterlife, also is just, God, don't like, you'll be depressed, but it's like, oh, but it feels so good because he's so good at it. Like, this is just wonderfully sad because it's just very fulfilling. He's very good at that. Even in Ghost Town, if you remember, Robert Kelly had a very small role in Ghost Town, and even he was really great at it. I was like, these comedians, who get to be fully their jerkish self on stage if they want, and then they just do these serious roles, and it's like, oh, but you're so good, you're pulling on my heartstrings, this is great. Like, I love seeing that.
Two of my favorite shows that happen to be on Netflix happen to be cartoons, and both star comedians in the voice role. One is BoJack Horseman, and the other one is F for Family. And watching those series almost back to back, it's like, you go from like with BoJack Horseman, you watch it, like it gets to a point where it's like, it is depressing. You're crying towards the end. But if you're watching with F was for Family, it's like you start with that, and then it's like almost a great pick-me-up, where it's just like Bill Burr has a way of making you laugh, but also making you think as well. And the same thing with BoJack Horseman, where it's basically it's Shakespeare in a way. And speaking of Shakespeare, it's an odd way of segueing into Shakespeare.
No, that's fine. But that's what I wanted to get across, is like, you asked me, those are my influences.
Oh,
and
of course.
Again, it's not necessarily because I wanted to do that type of art. It's, they influence me as people. Like, the way that they express themselves is what influences me. And it still does influence me. Everything that I try to work on. And this was also emphasized in college. My professors who were my acting professors, because some of them are production or like history, but the ones that were focused on purely the acting part of it, they like to do that. They like having, their philosophies were based in keeping a scene as realistic as possible, to keep your reactions as realistic as possible. What would you really say here? How would you really feel? And to explore that part of it. And I go, yeah, I respect that way I respect very much when you look at something. If you look at a script, or as an actor, you're looking to analyze it. Like, when you're doing all your actor work, that's where I go. That's my frame of thinking. That's how I frame everything. is keep it as real as possible. It was because my influences, unbeknownst to me at the time, but now that I look back, that's why. It's like, even something as silly, some might say that stand-up comedy is, everybody that I was watching, or at least everybody that I really loved and kept in my heart, were ones that were trying to be as real and genuine as possible. So when I look at something, I think of that. I go, I just want to get across something that's real and make people feel real things. I don't, as cheesy as that sounds, that's how I always want to approach anything I do, any work that I have. I was like, I want to keep this as genuine and real as possible. Like, that's who I grew up watching. That's who I respected. And I want to have that. Like, if anything, that's what I want my work to be. I've done that through theater, through directing things, acting them, writing them, even the comedy stuff. Like, some of the stuff I've had, like, it can make people uncomfortable. That's fine, as long as it's real. Like, I don't care as long as it's real.
Yeah, I think that's the end goal for comedy, where it's like, if you can make people uncomfortable but at the same time laugh, you're pretty much succeeding as a comedian. But yeah, I wanted to actually piggyback back into Shakespeare, where it was like, how it's similar, where Shakespeare is actually what you were just talking about before, where Shakespeare can make you laugh and cry and then make you think at the same time, because even though Shakespeare has a very, very difficult language, when it's performed right and it's actually, performed correctly, I should say. Well, not performed correctly. It's like, oh, this is the actual way of saying it. But when it's actually, when there's an adaptation, actually takes the barge, actually words on paper and actually makes it their own, that's when his work actually feels a lot more appropriate and a lot more like relatable too. So how did you actually come to terms to being, okay, I've done Shakespeare, I gotta keep on doing Shakespeare?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Basically, how did you become not influenced, how did you become engulfed with Shakespeare?
So my relationship with Shakespeare is actually a bit tough. I was always very intimidated by it. Even in high school, it was always very hard for me, because the language is very hard. To me, it did feel like I was reading another language, where I was like, I have to translate every line and then read it as like a normal play. And that followed me into college. I always struggled with it. I have a story that I tell. It's not really a story. It's just something that happened to me, where I was in a Shakespeare class that, it was just to teach you, if you didn't know already, teach you about iambic pentameter, how to, analyze the text, a little bit about the history, all that stuff. So there was one scene, I think it was a scene from Twelfth Night, and I was just struggling. Like, things weren't connecting for me. I was just very unsure, because I never had any confidence when it came to Shakespeare. And so I was struggling through this thing, and I went to the professor of the class. I went to him, after hours, and I explained this to him. I was like, I just need help. Like, I know I can get it. I just need a little bit more instruction. I'm just unsure. And I tell them the things I'm sure about. And this man, in all his infinite wisdom, who is one of the acting professors, looks at me. He's like, well, just do better. I'm like, oh, great, thanks, perfect. That's what you want to hear from a professor that's supposed to help you.